Hey folks, this is episode 3 of the Africa Hired podcast, and my name is Kola. I'm again here with my co-host Ayo. How's it doing, Ayo?
I'm doing pretty well, man. How are you doing on this fine Sunday?
I'm doing pretty well. I don't know if you noticed, but we have a different background behind me. I just moved into a new space. So
Yeah, it looks
um
a bit more off color. I'm not sure what color the previous one was, but maybe this is more off white, but slightly different. But yeah,
yeah, so it's going to be changing a little bit as over the next few weeks as I try to move in and unpack and things like that, but it's been
Mhm.
pretty good. Um so last episode we were talking about standards, as I call it, right? And what that really means for me, I would say, is quality of work, right? What is the quality expectations when you're producing your work products, or how you act as a professional in the workspace, right? And we wanted to kind of continue that conversation from last time. So the last time we talked about standards in general, and then we also talked about upskilling and using YouTube as a resource for that and other resources. But today I want us to kind of focus a little bit, talk to maybe the new graduates that are coming out of African universities. If they're anything like us, I don't. I think your experience was a little different, but in college, nobody taught me to be a professional, right? There were
yeah,
resources available that if I had known better, I should have taken advantage of, but I didn't, right? And there was no class that says, "Hey, sit down, let's teach you how to behave in the workplace, or let's teach you what the expectations are in the workplace."
hmm
Um, Except for whatever it is I was taught at home. So I wanted to use this kind of provide some information to our African brothers and sisters to kind of give them some ideas about the expectation they should expect in the workplace, especially when they are interviewing and hiring for jobs or global
hmm
remote jobs.
yeah.
So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think kind of having the knowledge and then being a professional is not necessarily doesn't necessarily go hand in hand sometimes. So in school, you're prepared to they teach you the information sometimes, but the aspects of being a professional in terms of showing up on time, diligence, discipline, work-life balance, time management. These are things that you kind of pick up as you gain more experience in the workforce. But it's not necessarily something that you receive when you get your diploma in school. You know,
Hmm.
so I think that's something that you definitely the earlier you're able to kind of adapt and learn those. Um, Kind of work skills, the easier it's going to be for you to a get a job and b stay in the job and see either get promoted or basically become remain relevant in whatever kind of role or position that you're in. So I definitely agree with that in terms of professionalism and standard. Um, Two very key things I think in the current job economy.
Hmm. So, one difference I think for folks that report to a job in person versus folks that kind of get remote jobs is that
Hmm.
for the folks that are there in person, they have more grace, right?
Yeah.
I think that co-workers tend to have less patience with folks that are working remotely. So it's kind
Yes.
of more important for you to be on point with these things rather than if you were in person, because in person I can always pull you aside and maybe bring you under my wing as a mentor mentee and say, hey, these are the things that you need to learn, or these are the things that you need to do. So let's
Hmm.
kind of talk about some of those things, right? So and I want to start with the thing that maybe is most common, or maybe the stereotype of Africans, right? They say African people time, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to use Nigeria as an example because Nigeria is my experience, right?
Hmm.
But one of the things that people talk about in Nigeria is Nigerian time, or things move slower here and whatnot. And that's okay, right? If you are working at a Nigerian company, or that's fine, right? Because everybody has that
Hmm.
same common expectation, and that's okay. But if you're
Yeah.
working in a remote job, especially with a global company where they have people working at different time zones, it is not okay for you to show up late at work. It is not
Yes.
okay for
Yes.
you to dial in late for a meeting. It is not okay for you to show up late for your interview. Those things
Hmm.
are important, and they are more important in some places than others. So I don't know this because I've never been to Switzerland, but I understand that the Swiss people are very particular about time. So
Hmm.
I like the German people. I hear they are very particular about time, right?
Yeah.
Americans, we are also particular about time, but I think there's a little bit more grace there. Now, if you go to
Yeah.
the Middle East, for example, I hear they're a lot more fluid when it comes to time, right? So
Hmm.
different expectations in different places, and you kind of need to understand what's going on there. And one thing I want to talk about before I pass it over to you, Ayo, to kind of fill in the blanks is sometimes I think that people would say, hey, you know what? I needed to commute from my house to this location to get on there for this interview or for that conversation or for that meeting. And when I got to the bus stop, the bus didn't come, or it was delayed, the transportation was late, or whatever. And that's the reason why I'm late, right? So I show up 15 minutes late um, for the meeting, and I expect everybody to be okay with it. And my response to you is no. If you know that you need to do those things, then you need to plan in advance to be there, right? Somebody once told me that if you're not 15 minutes early, you are late,
Yeah.
right? So what do you think about that?
I definitely agree with that. I think at a certain level of professionalism, there's kind of no excuses anymore at that point. I think at the point where is this is your livelihood, you depend on this to to pay your bills and things of that nature. Um, the people that you're working with, especially, I think personally working in the U.S. economy, the understanding has always been there's really no excuses.
Mm,
Is find a way to get it done. It's kind of the especially what in engineering in the space that I work in,
mhm.
it's find a way to get it done, or you're going to be hearing a lot of different things from people around you. So I think at that level, if you have to leave 15 minutes early, you have to figure that out. If you have to leave 30 minutes early, you have to figure that out. But ways in which to combat lateness or combat sort of like having the specter of the illusion of having a poor work ethic, I think is something that you definitely want to avoid when working in economies outside of Africa. I think right now in Africa, we're still building that work culture. We're still trying to, in some places, right? Because um, most people, it's still we still don't have that kind of work culture idea of just like getting things done no matter what. I think sometimes you kind of still hear excuses like communication issues or networking issues. But these overseas employers, they're not really interested in hearing things like that. So once they're paying you, is figure out a way to get it to make it work or get it done. That's kind
Mhm.
of the at that level.
Yeah, and one thing I think is really important here is that the expectation is that you are going to deliver, right?
Yes.
So, we are talking about it from the perspective of time. And I use the example of showing up on time for your work time or for a meeting or things like that. But that's also
Hmm.
applicable to providing your work products on time to the
Yes.
next party or to your stakeholders, right?
Hmm.
There's a saying in my industry, it says, under promise, over deliver,
Over deliver. Yes.
right? So people are not saying, and we should clarify, people are not saying that you should break your back, quote unquote, to do things, right? In the sense that
Hmm.
we are not saying that you should try to achieve the impossible. What we are saying is that you should make sure that when you say something, right, you can actually meet those expectations, right? If you're
Yes.
going to commit to something, yes, I am going to be there at that meeting at 8 o'clock. Then you need to make sure that you have planned or you have thought about it in your head that you can actually be there for 8 o'clock. If you cannot be there for 8 o'clock, do not say that. Say you're going to be
Hmm.
there at 8:30 and ask if there's a different time slot that would work. So one of the things that I would use, again, using Nigeria as an example, and I'm going to use an example of younger team members, right? They don't want to
Hmm.
say something that they feel is opposite to the older team member. So
Hmm.
sometimes the person will say, okay, you know what? Hey, can we all be here for this meeting at 8 o'clock? And they know they cannot make it, but they'll say, oh, yes, we will be there, and then show up late,
Yes.
right? That is not acceptable in the global workspace, especially for people that have options, right? They hired you, but they have options to hire other people. And if you don't want them to let you go so that they can go hire those other people, then you need to understand and you need to make sure that you're only committing to things you can actually make, right? And there
Yes.
are times where you have to stretch, right? Somebody says, hey, can you be there for 8 o'clock? You know what? I can't really be here for 8 o'clock, right? Um, if it's possible, maybe I can be there for 8:10. And if the person says that's okay, then that's fine. You already have that agreement that you are going to be there at 8:10. The meeting is going to start at 8 o'clock, right? But if you say
Yeah.
you're going to be there at 8 o'clock and you don't show up, that is not good.
Yeah, very true. And I also think that I think sometimes working with a few African contractors, I actually find the opposite to be true. Is sometimes usually they overpromise, underdeliver. So it's kind of finding that balance of realizing that when you're told that this is what is going to get done, you have to kind of prepare in your mind that okay, this is really what's going to get done. And I think especially when you're working remote, you need to over communicate, right? Because you're not in person. Someone can't just walk over to your desk and see what you're working on or ask you how a certain project is going. So it's important not to kind of have periods where you're not communicating, because at that point they're not really sure what's going on. One of the issues I'm even current I have when I'm trying to work with contractors and well, specifically Nigeria, because that's my example, is a lack of communication sometimes, right? Where I'm reaching out and I'm not hearing anything back, right?
Mm.
So it's already remote. We have a time difference. Like there's all these other obstacles. I think not communicating is probably one of the worst things you can do if you're working any sort of remote role, because the person, their only means to know kind of the status or something is on a project is by via speaking to you. So if they're not getting those kind of information or details about the project, it can be very frustrating for whatever projects you guys are working on.
Yeah, so let's clarify that for folks, right? So when we
Mm-hmm.
say over communicate, what does that mean? So, for example, I'm just going to role play here. Let us assume
Mm-hmm.
that you are here in the US, I
Mm-hmm.
am on the African continent,
Mm-hmm.
you hired me as a subcontractor. If you send me an email, what is your expectation for when I should reply back? Latest, when I should reply back?
For me, I think, I mean, now it depends on times, right? If you want to be very stringent, if I send you an email as soon as work opens, I usually personally would like to hear back by lunch. If I
Mm,
send it by lunchtime, I want to hear back by end of day. But the important thing is, I think if you get an email, as long as it's not like right when you're closing work, like I think you should be able to respond by end of day. If you're getting it in the AM by end of day, I think makes sense.
mhm.
So that's the kind of level of communication that I personally would prefer. Or next day, just don't make it go multiple days with no people response. That's what I think. That's when you kind of get this frustration between different parties. But as long as you respond by end of day or latest the next day, I think that's those are valid response times.
Mhm. So I'm going to put some hours to the words you said to kind of make it clear for people, right? So you
Okay.
gave the example where there's actually a defined work schedule, right? You work
Yeah.
from 8 o'clock to maybe 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. or
Yeah.
6
Yeah.
p.m. Sometimes when you have this relationship, there is no defined work hours, right? You have to make your own
Hmm.
hours as long as you're getting the job done. But
Yeah.
using the example that you gave, what I'm hearing you say is, listen, if I send you an email, I am looking for a response back within 4 hours from the moment I send that email up to 24 hours um,
Yes.
time frame, right? If
Yeah.
you
That's
send
correct.
right, 4 hours will less than 4 hours will be fantastic, right? If you do that,
Yeah. I mean, that's
fantastic.
ideal. That
But we
was
understand that life happens and things like that. So we want you to send us a reply back with time difference and everything within 24 hours of receiving an email. I
yes.
want to hear something back from you. All right, so
Yes.
let me give you a different example then. If we use WhatsApp or text messages nowadays, and those are becoming
Hmm.
more and more common, if you send me a text and I'm working for you, what time are you looking for a response back from?
I would say still 4 to 24 hours. Because text is more personal. Ideally, I would like you to, because I think usually when you send a text, it's more time sensitive. Email is like you might not be on your computer. There could be internet. You might not have internet, things like that. So that's email. You kind of built in the lag of, okay, I'm not gonna get an immediate response. But I think text, because it's on your phone, that's usually on you all the time. I would prefer an earlier response, but sometimes that might be unrealistic as well. So I think 4 to 24 hours for text, I would go with that as well.
Mm.
So I'll do that for text as well.
So I would actually modify that. So I would say somebody sends you a text, they expect a faster response, right? So
Yeah.
what I would actually say would be somewhere between 2 to 6 hours.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is a couple of things. I think sometimes people don't respond to a text because they don't have the answer yet. I think sometimes
Hmm.
you have to reply and say, hey, I got your text. I am looking into it. I'll get back to you by this time, right?
Yes.
That's typically okay. But sometimes because I'm trying to figure out the answer to your question and I don't have the answer yet, I will not ignore your text, not really ignore. I'm working on it, but I don't tell you that I'm working on it. And you are just
Hmm.
sitting down there waiting for some reply back. So I think
Yeah.
what I would say is that if somebody sends you a text and if it is during work hours, you should reply pretty soon, right? In a few
Hmm.
hours. Immediately would be best, but in a few hours because you may have your phone and do not respond or
Yeah.
I'm busy and things like that. However,
Yeah.
if you saw the text and you know that you need more time to work on that thing and give them an answer, they just reply back and say, hey, I got your text. I'm looking into it. I'll get back to you by this date. And when I
Okay.
say I'm going to get back to you by this date or time, you need to meet that time because you are the one that's committing. You're specifying the deadline for this response back, right?
Hmm.
So do not promise, again, do not promise something that you cannot meet.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think also nowadays the line between text and email is kind of a little bit blurred as well.
Mhm.
That's kind of why I still kind of gave it the buffer of 4 to 24 hours because sometimes it could be a text, but it's really an email in a text form.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, I can give a little bit of flexibility there. But as Carla mentioned, like if you get a text, it usually means it's probably urgent. So I think 2 to 6 hours makes sense.
Yeah. I think one thing I want to kind of talk about, because we kind of hinted at it already, but we didn't really go into it, is this element of telling the truth, right?
Yes.
And what that means is I want to focus on white lies, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of people don't consider white lies to be lies, right? It's just something you say to be polite or whatnot.
Hmm.
But again, when you're dealing with people and they have not met you in person, they've only seen you on Zoom. The
Hmm.
only thing they know about you are your communications, either in a Zoom meeting or via text or via email, right?
Yeah.
Those words that you say or write carry more weight than if I saw you in person, right? Because that's the
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
that's the only way that I get to experience you, right?
Yes.
So when you tell me, hey, I'm going to be there at 8, and to you that's a white lie, that is not a white lie to me, right? When you say
No.
I'm going to deliver this thing by end of day today, and that's a white lie, that's not a white lie to me, right? To the other
Hmm.
side of the equation or the other side of the conversation. So I think
Yeah.
it's really important to kind of understand that when you're in a professional setting, especially in the global workspace, there are no such things as white lies, right?
Yeah.
Do not commit to something that you cannot meet,
I,
right?
I agree. I agree. And
And
I think, yeah, I was gonna say, I think the temptation oftentimes with African contractors is, um, depending on they might not get roles all the time. So when they do get one, it's this kind of you get sort of the urge to overpromise. Like,
mm,
yes, I can get this done. I can do this at this time. But I think the funny enough, the most important thing isn't. I mean, your capabilities is important, but I think also your truthfulness and the ability to, for me, as like if I'm hiring as a client, to know what I'm getting, I think is more important than you pretending that you can do this at this time or pretending that you have a certain skill level when you don't. I think at the end of the day, like you want to have a certain level of understanding or confidence in whoever it is you're tasking with a project. So I think that what I mentioned, the truthfulness, I think is more important than how fast you can get something done, right? Because you can always plan around time. But when you get incorrect information or you don't know certain information, that's what makes things more difficult and more uncertain.
mhm. One thing I like to talk about when I'm talking to younger folks in the workplace is to say that unlike college, in business there is no partial credit, right?
Hmm.
In college, during my time, there were multiple times where you were doing a test or a quiz. You kind of have an idea of how to approach it, but you don't know the full, no, you don't know the full solution. So you kind
Yeah.
of do it to the piece, so that you stop there. And your hope is that the professor or the instructor that's going to grade the paper is going to give you some partial credit, right?
Hmm.
In business, when I'm looking for you to give me an answer and you give me partial credit, that's useless, right? Because
Yes.
I don't have a need for partial credit. I have a need for the answer. And
Yeah.
unlike college, where everybody has to do their own work, right? In business, you don't have to do your own work. You can have the
No.
opportunity to collaborate. So, what does that
Hmm.
mean? If you don't know the answer, you can go figure it out, right? You can call your colleagues and say, hey, this is the part I know. What do I need to
Yeah.
do here? What do I need to do there? Could you help me out with this? Okay, right? We can collaborate together, take all our knowledge together to come up with the final answer, right?
Yes.
I cannot tell you how many times, of recent weeks that I'm trying to either hire somebody to help out with the podcast or help us with things related to some of the background stuff related to the podcast as well. And I say, hey, why don't you go try to do this? And instead of the person to tell me, you know what, I don't know how to do this, or I only know how to do it up to this point, they will go do the stuff and give me the wrong thing and say, hey, let me know what you want to fix or let me know what I should change. And my
Yeah.
response to that is if I have to spend the time to tell you what needs to change or fix, then I shouldn't hire you, right? Because when you hire somebody,
Yeah.
it is to make your job easier, not necessarily to fix their work,
Yes. Yes.
right?
I agree completely. Yeah.
So I think something to kind of think about is to understand that and say, when you are dealing with your peers in the workforce, is to understand that all of them are there to help you get your job done. So
Hmm.
when you get assigned a task, it is okay to say, hey, I don't know how to do this thing, but I can figure it out. And
Yeah.
then while I am figuring it out, I can call my peer, hey, Ayo, how do I approach this part? How do I approach that part? Hey, Tom, how do I approach this part? How do I approach that part? And then
Hmm.
basically take all that knowledge I get from everybody else, combine it together to actually come up with a finished product, not a partial product. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And I think sometimes a lot of the reasons we run into those kind of issues is time management. I think sometimes contractors, they're taking on multiple projects at the same time.
Mm,
And I feel like in Africa in particular, there's a hierarchy where it's like it's not necessarily when you hire the contractor, it's how much money the contractor is making from you. So in a sense, like me, I've personally run into issues where I've hired a contractor for a job. They've told me that they're working on other jobs. I said, okay, that's fine. Will you have the time to work on this project as well? They said yes. And then once they gave me the deliverable, I would say it was subpar, right? And then the excuse is, I'm working on this other project. Well, it's like, well, we've asked you that originally. So now this is what I'm saying. It's important to communicate exactly what is going on. Because for me personally, I think the worst thing is to have one expectation and to receive something that's completely below expectation. So I think that's where you run into issues, right? So I think it's the most important thing is to say, um, this is my timeline right now. This is what I'm capable of doing. This is when you receive it. Just being, I originally I said over communicative, and I think I would like to stress that word. Like just communicate what is important to know. I think that's the most important thing you can do. I think the worst thing is to find out after the fact that, oh, I couldn't do this because of this, or I couldn't do this because of, like, no one wants to hear that. We want to hear solutions, not necessarily more problems. So that's why I'm bringing you my problem, because I want you to solve it. I don't want you to bring me more problems as well. So
mhm.
I think that's something that, maintaining a high standard and communicating exactly what your expectations and what your ability to deliver is on a project.
Yeah, and that goes both ways, right? So that goes to your ability to perform the task
Hmm.
or the timeline for the task. But that
Yeah.
also goes into what you would like for
Hmm.
compensation,
Yes.
right? Do not commit to compensation that you do not think is okay, right? If
Hmm.
you want more money, say you want more money and
Hmm.
say what the amount is, right? One of the things that we tend to do in Nigeria is, oh, what can you give me? Whatever you have is good enough, right? When in reality, what we are really
Yeah.
saying is, I want this, right?
Yeah.
People cannot read your mind. You need to also communicate that
Hmm.
um, in the beginning. And more importantly, is if you are lucky and fortunate enough to find a company that would pay you the amount that you're looking for, then you actually need to deliver to make
Yes.
sure that the relationship is good on both sides.
Yes. I completely agree. So like having an understanding of what your desired compensation is, and being able to negotiate for that, I think is also important as well.
Yeah. So there are multiple areas we could go about these topics, right? We just
Hmm.
tackled maybe three for right now. We'll probably tackle
Yeah.
some in the future episodes.
Hmm.
Um, but I hope this kind of provides some framework to kind of start thinking about when you are applying to remote jobs or when you are
Hmm.
working on remote teams. And what we talked about, we tend to talk about it from a Western perspective because we are based in the US. But
Hmm.
you may be working for a company that's based in Asia. You may be working in a company that's based in the Middle East. There will be these things still apply, but there will be adaptations that you will need to do for that particular environment. And one of the things that you're going to need to know is learn and adapt to that particular environment, right? One of
Yeah.
the things that is really fantastic about the American work culture is that Americans go to Europe and they're able to find jobs over there. They go to the
Yeah.
Middle East and they're able to find jobs over there. And yes, they also have friction as well, but they're able to succeed and actually get things done.
Yes. Yeah. That's very true. So I think the American kind of standard for workforce is very, very high up there. So I think if you kind of have an understanding of the American workforce, you can kind of translate it to other places as well. Um, So I would aim for the highest standard possible, and then after that, try to adapt um, to whatever country or continent that I end up working on.
All right. So, Aya, let's pause here for now. We'll
Hmm.
continue this conversation in the next episode.
Hmm.
Um, but before we let everybody go, if you need to reach out to us, you can send us an email at africahired@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us through social media, Africa Hired, or the different platforms that are available. We'd love to hear from you. If you are looking to hire somebody from the continent to help you with something, let us know. We are willing to help you out with finding talents to help you out from Africa. If you're in Africa, you either have questions or you're looking for remote jobs, reach out to us as well. We'll put you in contact with people that we know or resources that we have or that we know of to help you get that remote job. Aya, it's always a pleasure. Anything you want to tell the audience before we let them go?
But yeah, no, definitely just what Carla said. Please reach out to us if you're on the continent of Africa looking to get into the remote field, or if you're in Western in the West and looking for someone in Africa to kind of take on a project that you have as well. So yeah, thank you for tuning in.
All right. Bye, folks.